Bonjour les amis. Welcome back to Generator. I hope everyone's well. It's April in Paris, and I know that means so much it means different things to so many of us. For me, it is, again, a wonderful time of year to watch so many things in bloom. Paris is awash with these beautiful lime green, tiny little leaves that are starting to unfold, and it's awash with pink and white blossoms on trees. So it's really, really a sight to behold. But spring in Paris to me also means entertaining. This is the time of year I have a lot of guests and friends that come into town. And it's a wonderful time to host them. So today I wanted to talk about the French dinner party and how this wonderful event, and I want to call it event because you are thoughtful and intentional about French dinner parties, how this wonderful event has given me lots of lessons about life. Welcome to Generator. I'm Jane Bertch. I spent the first half of my life working in a corporate organization, and then I decided to trade that all in to become an entrepreneur. Yes, here in your favorite city of Paris, France. And today, I hope I'm a guide on your journey to personal reinvention and transformation. When you think about le repas gastronomique français, the gastronomic meal in French, which you should know, by the way, this is so important in French culture. In 2010, it was indoctrinated in UNESCO as a part of the French patrimoine, the French heritage, something that is so cherished that we must always hold to it. A meal. So what is the repas gastronomique français? It's not what we eat, it's how we eat. It's the ceremony of how we eat here in France. And that meal is comprised of an entrée, a plat, fromage, and dessert. So basically your starter, your main course, your fromage, which always comes before the dessert, and then of course the dessert. So that sacred setting of those four courses, usually served with wine, is so very much a part of French culture. And I think that's pretty beautiful. So what has it taught me about life? Some really interesting things. Let me start with, you should know at a French dinner party never to sit to the table until you're invited to do so. So something I learned, which you can read about in my memoir, of what not to do. Don't run to the table and grab your seat. You should be waiting to see where the host or hostess is going to invite you to sit. And that's so special because what that means is they've really put thought into where you're placed around the table. And frankly, before you even get there, they put a lot of thought into who will sit around that table with them. That to me is a great life lesson, to think and be very intentional about who sits around your table. And I'll say that literally in France and perhaps figuratively. Who is it that you really want to have around your table? And why is that so important at a French dinner party? I think the worst thing you could have at a French dinner party is silence and awkward discussions. So the hosts and hostess I know really put a lot of emphasis into thinking about the personalities, the characters, the harmony, and the tension that they want at that party. So before they've even put thought into the meal, they've really thought about who are the people that we want around this table tonight. And I think about that a lot. And talking about tension, nothing will teach you more about tension in France than to sit at a French dinner party. And as I said earlier, nobody wants to have a silent dinner party. They want robust discussion. And sometimes that robust discussion happens through tension. And that's okay. Tension is a wonderfully powerful thing. Tension is what helps us grow. Tension is where you test your limits. So in the scope of a party, you will hear very robust debates. You'll hear people challenging each other. You'll hear disagreeing. French people will be very happy to share their opinion on something, even if it's contrary to the others around the table. I think about that a lot. I think about having the integrity and the strength to share my opinion, even if it's different to those sitting around my table. That to me is a big life lesson. And so that arises into debate, which is welcomed. And they will get heated. And to the untrained ear, you may think, oh my goodness, this is going to end poorly. And I can tell you, I've been at some dinner parties where I thought, my gosh, nobody's going to complain about the music being loud. They're going to be complaining about hearing the arguments at the table. But somehow it ends with everybody being friends. The way they sat down happy to be together and still yet argued and disagreed and agreed to disagree. They left united. They left still appreciating each other, even when they disagreed. That to me is a great, great life lesson that I think about daily. So discord and harmony can live side by side. They can live side by side and it not cause an imbalance. Again, another lesson I've learned, and I've talked about this a lot. I guess I've really come to appreciate in life we have competing forces all the time. And how can we honor them and accept them and still be okay? Another thing I've realized about French dinner parties is they've helped me to find my voice, to share, to engage. If you don't want to get another invitation back, sit there silent. They're expecting you to be very much a part of that show for the evening. So finding your voice and feeling free to speak up and confident to jump in. I've learned a lot about that sitting around a table. And in finding your voice, you should know the cadence of how people speak here is very different. In my experience. If you want to see a good example of that, one, a French dinner party, which we're talking about now, but if you can't, watch a movie where they're around a dinner. Watch the French news where there's a panel of people speaking. And what I mean when I say cadence, I grew up in North America where you tend to speak, there's a silence, and then the other person responds. And that goes back and forth. It's like a tennis match. Here, that does not happen the same way. Imagine a tennis match with about 10 balls in flight at the same time. And it's not considered rude. It's just the way people communicate. They will tend to talk at the same time or over one another. So finding your voice in that setting can be challenging, especially for me when I'm attempting to speak in a language which is not my mother tongue and still yet have something meaningful to say. And that's something meaningful, again, something I've learned at a French dinner party. They're not usually light subjects that come across the table. They're things that might be seen as a bit uncomfortable in other countries. There's politics, perhaps religion, current affairs that nobody would dare broach, all sorts of topics that people need to discuss. And they need to discuss openly. And they need to know that the person sitting across from them is very likely to have a different opinion and will share it. And that's okay as well. But still yet, there's space around that table for everyone. And to me, that's a very, very beautiful lesson. Something that sits in the front of my mind these days, where we do have a lot of discord. How can we keep the dialogue open? How can we disagree? How can we debate? How can we sometimes even get heated? And still yet get up from the table as friends. There's a lesson in that. One of the other great lessons I've picked up is care. I've been lucky to be hosted at some extraordinary dinners. And I'm not saying extraordinary in terms of fancy, over the top. I'm saying extraordinary in terms of the care that the host or hostess has put in to that meal. The thought, the preparation of the dinner, the care to use the good stuff, and to be very intentional about using the good stuff. So French dinner parties have taught me to bring out my good stuff. I don't have to wait for that moment, but I'm certainly not going to wait for a special holiday. Anytime I have people I care about around the table, I want to create a beautiful experience for them. And if that means taking time to take the cream out of the plastic container and put it into a beautiful little bowl, that's important. And here it's expected because it shows care and attention to the people that are around your table. And it shows your willingness to share the best of what you have with them. So let's think about that lesson. Showing care and attention to the people that sit around your table, literally and figuratively. In a busy, distracted world, I think about that all the time. And the people that are around my table, figuratively, how they've been there to support me and care for me, and how I can do the same for them. All from a French dinner table. And just some other fun things you may want to know because of that care and attention. Culturally, if you're invited to a French dinner party, the North American in me, if you say be there at 8, I'm there at 7:55. If I'm not 5 minutes early, I'm already late. And I'm usually in the neighborhood. If you look out of the window, you'll probably see me sitting on a park bench waiting for 8 to arrive. That's not done here. So if you are invited, you should be 15 minutes late of the time that they told you. So if they've told you to come at 8 p.m., you arrive at 8:15. That's expected. That's an expected norm here. And that's called the 15 minutes de politesse. The 15 minutes of politeness, or le 4 de politesse, officially, the 15 minutes of politeness. And that's just giving your host or hostess that extra time to prepare. And they're expecting that you won't arrive until 15 minutes after. So that's been a learning lesson and a fun one. And when I have international couples, we always do a check-in to say, okay, is that 8 p.m. our time, or is that 8 p.m. in France before we arrive? And it is very polite to arrive with a small gesture of some sort, with the exception of wine. And again, I've gone to so many dinner parties in North America and even here with people who I'm very close with, where I'll bring a bottle of wine. But if you're at a proper French dinner party, bringing wine can feel awkward. And I'll tell you why. Because in the care and attention to that beautiful dinner that's been made for you, wine is such an important part of it. So your host or hostess will have carefully selected all the wines that they're going to serve. So when you arrive with a beautiful bottle that you've put a lot of thought into, you're likely to put your host or hostess in an awkward position because they want to acknowledge this beautiful gift you've come with, but it may not work with the meal that they're serving. So try to avoid wine. At a very formal French dinner party, I advise against flowers. I have found actually in a very, very old etiquette manual that I need to get my hands on again because it was so fascinating about the things you do and you don't do. But you never want to put your hosts in distress. It sounds awfully heavy. And when you arrive with a bouquet of flowers, which are, again, so beautiful and so thoughtful, your host or hostess have to shuffle around trying to find a vase. And if you are in Paris, they're likely to already have flowers. That's such a big part of Parisian culture here, is buying flowers at the local florist or shopping for them at the market. So you might put them in a position where, again, they're feeling awkward because they have to find a vase, or maybe they don't have one because they're already in use. So people ask me, oh my gosh, well, what can I bring then? So some of the things that I suggest you could bring are a nice box of chocolates. That way they may serve them at the end of the meal with coffee. I see a lot of people, they may know each other better when they do this for obvious reasons. They like to offer books. And I think that's a beautiful gesture. Wanting to share knowledge with somebody and wanting to share a book that has touched you. And in sitting around the table, you should know, usually couples are never seated together unless they're honeymooners in their first year of marriage. Oftentimes you will be split up if you're a couple around the table, again, to encourage diversity and lively discussion. It's nice to be seated next to somebody that is new to you so you get to discover them. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And the host or hostess, they don't necessarily sit at the top of the table. They'll probably sit in the middle. Again, not together, separate, but they won't be at the heads of the table. And then, of course, you have all the fun things about how you set the table, whether you have the tines of the fork down, which is common, unless you have a tablecloth, because you won't want those little points on the fork to put dents in your tablecloth. But all of that to say, there's just so much care and thought that goes into a French dinner party. So many little life lessons that we can pick up about being intentional, about thinking who's around your table, about caring for those that are around your table. And when you're in that debate and that discussion, thinking carefully about the words you use and how you use them. Wouldn't we be in a better position if we were all thinking very carefully about the words we use and how they impact others? So, friends, I hope to see you around a French dinner party table one day. It's a magical experience. And like most things, if you're there and you're present and you're curious, there's so many wonderful things to learn. about the culture, and perhaps most importantly, about yourself. So I'll leave you with that. I hope to see you next time. If you think somebody might enjoy this episode, please share it. And if you enjoyed it, please take time to rate it or send me an email. I'd love to hear your feedback. And I love journaling. So if you go to a French dinner party, please journal about it after. Think about your experiences. Think about what you felt. Think about what you learned. And if you need journal prompts, I have those on my website, janebertch.com/journal. And if you really love learning about French culture and creativity and yourself, you may want to check out one of my Generate Her retreats here in Paris. I'd love to have you. So until next time, my friends, à bientôt.